We have a new government, and like many Canadians, I'm feeling hopeful about the future, especially about the opportunity to change our electoral system to make it more fair and representative. The plan is to eliminate our first-past-the-post system and introduce a new electoral system before the next election. And it's exciting. After all, how often in a country's history do we get a do-over, a chance to really change and improve a system that's no longer working for us, not for the last 100 years, and not likely for the next? So, what do we want, and what kind of new electoral process will give it to us? What kind of governance do I want that our current system doesn't give me? For me, it's about much more than the numbers. So first of all, I want an electoral process that is fair, representative, and proportional. It's got to be transparent and easy for me to understand and trust. I want our elected politicians to be less adversarial, more collaborative and productive, to work together on my behalf. And of course, I want it to be stable, functional, with clear procedures that cannot be perverted. A lot of people have been working on it. Here's what I know about the three models currently being discussed. First, proportional representation. This is the idea that the elected representatives are proportional to the percentage of Canadians voting for them. That is, if 30% of us vote Conservative, then 30% of the members in Parliament are Conservative. MMP is one form of proportional representation. The idea here is that we rebalance the boundaries. We end up with fewer riding representatives plus new regional representatives. We keep the same total number of representatives. In the voting booth, I get one vote for my local riding representative and one vote for my regional representative, choosing from a party list. That's 2 checks on my ballot. The final result at my local riding level is still winner-take-all, same as our current first-past-the-post. But in Ottawa, the final result is closer to the popular vote and more proportional. What's different about the MMP is the party list. Supporters have different ideas on how these party lists would be created, but they all seem to agree on one thing. The lists are created by the parties. So, how does this idea measure up? Is it fair, representative, proportional, transparent, easy to understand and trust? Well, in Ottawa, the number of MPs elected for each party reflects the percentage of people who voted for them. 10% vote Green, so 10% of the members in Parliament are Green. In fact, the number crunchers agree that final numbers can be adjusted to near perfect proportionality. So, much more fair and much more proportional. But down at the riding level, it is still a winner-take-all, so less representative of my vote. Then there's that pesky party list idea, and for me it's an important and contentious issue. Just how do people get on it? Do they go through the same open process that other candidates do, voting by members at the constituency level? Or is this selection made behind closed doors, by an inner circle, or in some other way? And who decides anyway? Well, if the lists are chosen by party insiders, that's not fair. It's not representative or transparent. But if the candidates go through the same process, then it is fair and transparent. But at the present time, nobody seems to know. None of the supporters of this idea is prepared to clarify the mechanism for building these lists. They're all happy to leave it up to the parties to decide on how to make up the lists. Let's look closer. Is it collaborative? Is it less adversarial or more productive? Well, get ready for more minority governments. Could be a good thing. Long term, we may see a less adversarial culture and problem solving across the aisle. So potentially more collaborative, less adversarial, and more productive. But with the same old winner-take-all elections, there's nothing to discourage all that negative advertising and demonizing your opponent during campaigns. And it's really hard to make up after the election. So not necessarily more collaborative or productive. The second model is called preferential representation. Here we have the idea that the most preferred or acceptable candidate gets elected in each riding. Some people call it the ranked ballot model. It gives me a greater say in elections by tapping into my second and third choices. In the voting booth, I get to mark my first, second, third, etc. choices from a list of 4 or 5 candidates, one from each party. We keep the current number of ridings and candidates, and we elect one representative per riding, just like now. So, how does it measure up? Is it fair, representative, proportional, transparent, easy to understand and trust? Well, I can express more choice, and I don't need to vote strategically for a candidate I don't like, so it is more representative. Certainly simple, straightforward in the voting booth, so it's easy to understand and trust. Counting the vote is more complex, but it's still transparent, so it's fair. But the number crunchers suggest that final results at the federal level would favor middle ground parties, giving parties like the Liberals a permanent advantage. So it's not fair if you support one of the other parties, and it's not proportional. Looking deeper, is it collaborative, less adversarial, more productive? Well, a ranked ballot tones down the rhetoric during the campaign. They all want my second vote, so it is less adversarial right from the beginning. If it's a minority government, the elected members have been playing nice during the campaign, so theoretically better positioned to be collaborative and therefore productive afterwards. Theoretically, they haven't been demonizing each other for the whole election. But majority governments are in for 4 years, so if it's a majority government, they probably have less incentive to collaborate. The third model is proportional and preferential. It's called the STV, single transferable vote, or at least that's one combo that gives us a preferential system at the local level and proportionality at the federal level. The idea here is to combine several single-member ridings into fewer but multi-member ridings. In the voting booth, it's a ranked ballot, so I can mark my first, second, and third, etc. choices from a big list, a group of 15 to 25 candidates, usually 2 from each major party. Each large riding elects 4 or 5 candidates. So how does this idea measure up? Well, is it fair, representative, proportional, easy to understand and trust? With 4 or 5 elected representatives, there is a greater chance my choices will count. So it's more proportional and representative of my choices. There's no party list, so all those candidates answer directly to me, the voter. So I like that. It's more transparent and fair. At the federal level, experts agree this system is superior on paper, so proportional and fair. But with large electoral districts and long lists of candidates, it's more work for me wading through all those candidates. It tends to favor name recognition, i.e. the incumbents. So it's not so easy to understand or trust. And counting, complex formulas for counting, make it not so easy to understand or trust. Looking deeper, is it collaborative, less adversarial, more productive? The ranked ballot tends to promote less partisanship during the campaign. Again, they all want my second vote. Once elected, they may collaborate to avoid annoying me with another election, so less adversarial and potentially more collaborative and productive on all counts. So far, these are the only 3 models being floated, and you can see there are some general themes that are emerging. Number 1, first past the post, winner take all, at any level, ensures that the elections are fought in a bitter, hyper-partisan, polarizing arena, and Canadians are just tired of all that negative advertising. Number 2, the goal of pure proportionality at the federal level sacrifices representation down at the riding level, if first past the post is retained. It's just not representative when 34% of the vote can decide the riding winner, just like now. Number 3, increased proportionality will lead to more minority governments. Number 4, majority governments seem to be more stable, but changing governments can result in big swings in policy and hamper a country's ability to plan long term. Number 5, a ranked ballot guarantees me much greater representation at the riding level. I get to express more choice and a greater chance of seeing my vote reflected in that final result. Number 6, multi-member regions provide more proportionality and fairness at the federal level, and they discourage the hyper-partisan behavior during elections. They all want our second vote. Number 7, larger ridings and regions are more complicated and less transparent. There just are more candidates to sort out. And finally, number 8, the party list idea of any kind is more complex and more difficult at the regional level. Finding all those extra candidates, putting them through a democratic nomination process, these are all added burdens to what are currently volunteer and largely ad hoc executives. Can they handle it? Will Canadians trust it? Clearly, there are trade-offs with all the models. None of them are perfect. My thought is, can we adopt some of the positive elements and come up with a made-in-Canada solution? Here's one idea that just might do it. I call it partnering. This idea combines 2 of our current ridings into one larger riding. I get 2 representatives instead of only 1. It's a ranked ballot, so I still get to indicate my first, second, and third preferences from a group of about 8 candidates, 1 from each major party. And in the end, 2 candidates, likely from different parties, go on to Ottawa to represent my riding. How does this idea measure up? Is it fair, representative, proportional, easy to understand and trust? Well, I expand my choices and increase my chances of seeing my candidate win, so more representative. It's not as perfectly proportional as the MMP model, but it's much more proportional than our current system. With no party-controlled lists, it is transparent and as fair as our current system. But the slightly bigger ridings and a few more candidates makes it all a bit more complex for me, so not quite so easy to understand. Looking deeper, is it collaborative, less adversarial, more productive? Well, the ranked ballots do tone down the negative campaigns, less adversarial. With 2 elected reps per riding, there's a greater opportunity for them to collaborate and less incentive to support non-confidence motion. So more collaborative and more productive. This is only one interesting idea, but hopefully it illustrates my point that the task ahead is not a narrow choice between a few ideas. Why would we sell ourselves short? As Canadians, we're naturally innovative, we're collaborative, and we're proud of our pioneering spirit. As the process gets underway, we need to challenge all voices and demand a thorough and nuanced discussion. It's our chance.